Chapters 5 and 6 of Les Misérables, Volume 4, by Victor Hugo. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Martina Hutchins in Berkeley, California. Les Misérables, Volume 4, by Victor Hugo. Translated by Isabel, Florence, HAPGOOD. Book 12, Corinth. Chapter 5, Preparations. The journals of the day, which said that nearly impregnable structure of the barricade of the Rue de la Chanvrerie, as they call it, reached to the level of the first floor, were mistaken. The fact is that it did not exceed an average height of 6 or 7 feet. It was built in such a manner that the combatants could, at their will, either disappear behind it or dominate the barrier and even scale its crest by means of a quadruple row of paving stones placed on top of each other and arranged as steps in the interior. On the outside, the front of the barricade, composed of piles of paving stones and casks bound together by beams and planks, which were entangled in the wheels of Anco's dray and of the overturned omnibus, had a bristling and inextricable aspect. An aperture large enough to allow a man to pass through had been made between the wall of the house and the extremity of the barricade, which was furthest from the wine-shop, so that an exit was possible at this point. The pole of the omnibus was placed upright and held up with ropes, and a red flag, fastened to this pole, floated over the barricade. The little Mondétour barricade, hidden behind the wine-shop building, was not visible. The two barricades united formed a veritable redoubt, and Enjolras and Courfeyrac had not thought fit to barricade the other fragment of the Rue Mondétour, which opens through the Rue des Prêcheurs and issue into the Halles, wishing, no doubt, to preserve a possible communication with the outside, and not entertaining much fear of an attack through the dangerous and difficult street of the Rue des Prêcheurs. With the exception of this issue, which was left free, and which constituted what Foulard, in his strategical style, would have termed a branch, and taking into account also the narrow cutting arranged on the Rue de la Chanvrerie, the interior of the barricade, where the wine-shop formed a salient angle, presented an irregular shape, closed on all sides. There existed an interval of 20 paces between the grand barrier and the lofty houses which formed the background of the street, so that one might say that the barricade rested on these houses, all inhabited, but closed from top to bottom. All this work was performed without any hindrance, in less than an hour, and without this handful of bold men seeing a single bearskin cap or a single bayonet make their appearance. The very bourgeois who still ventured at this hour of riot to enter the Rue Saint-Denis cast a glance at the Rue de la Chanvrerie, caught sight of the barricade, and redoubled their pace. The two barricades being finished, and the flag run up, a table was dragged out of the wine-shop, and Courfeyrac mounted on the table. Enjolras brought the square coffer, and Courfeyrac opened it. This coffer was filled with cartridges. When the mob saw the cartridges, a tremor ran through the bravest, and a momentary silence ensued. Courfeyrac distributed them with a smile. Each one received 30 cartridges. Many had powder, and set about making others with the bullets which they had run. As for the barrel of powder, it stood on the table on one side, near the door, and was held in reserve. The alarm beat which ran through all Paris did not cease, but it had finally come to be nothing more than a monotonous noise to which they no longer paid any attention. This noise retreated at times, and again drew near with melancholy undulations. They loaded the guns and carbines all together without haste, with solemn gravity. Enjolras went and stationed 3 sentinels outside the barricades, on the Rue de la Chanvrerie, the second in the Rue des Prêcheurs, the third at the corner of the Rue de la Petite Truanderie. Then The barricades having been built, the posts assigned, the guns loaded, the sentinels stationed, they waited, alone in those redoubtable streets, through which no one passed any longer, surrounded by those dumb houses which seemed dead and in which no human movement palpitated, enveloped in the deepening shades of twilight, which was drawing on, in the midst of that silence through which something could be felt advancing, and which had about it something tragic and terrifying, isolated, armed, determined, and tranquil. Chapter 6. Waiting. During those hours of waiting, what did they do? We must needs tell, since this is a matter of history. While the men made bullets and the women lint, while a large saucepan of melted brass and lead, destined to the bullet mold, smoked over a glowing brazier, while the sentinels watched, weapon in hand, on the barricade, while Enjolras, whom it was impossible to divert, kept an eye on the sentinels, Combeferre, Courfeyrac, Jean Prouvaire, Feuilly, Bossuet, Joly, Bahorel, and some others, sought each other out and united as in the most peaceful days of their conversations in their student life, and in one corner of this wine shop, which had been converted into a casement, a couple of paces distant from the redoubt which they had built, with their carbines loaded and primed, resting against the backs of their chairs, these fine young fellows, so close to a supreme hour, began to recite love verses. What verses? These. Vous rappelez-vous notre douce vie, lorsque nous étions si gentils deux, et que nous n'avions à cœur d'autre envie que d'être bien mis et d'être amoureux. Lorsque, en ajoutant votre âge à mon âge, nous ne comptons pas à 40 ans, et que, dans notre humble et petit ménage, toute même l'hiver nous attend printemps. Beau jour, Manuel était fier et sage, Paris s'assied à dessein banquet. Florence, la fondre et votre corsage avait une épingle où j'ai même piquois. Tu vous contemplez, avocat sans causer, quand je vous menais à Prado dîner. Vous étiez jolie au point que le rosé, mais faisions la fête de se retourner. Je l'entendais dire, et elle belle, comme elles sont bonnes, quels cheveux à fleurs. Sous son mantelet, elle cache une aile, son bonnet charmant et à peine éclos. J'irai avec tu, pressant ton bras souple, les passants croyant que l'amour charmait. Ave Marie, dans notre heureux couple, les du mois d'avril à bon mois de mai. Nous vivions cachés, comptant porte-clous, dévorant l'amour bon fruit défendu. Ma bouche n'avait pas dit une chose, que déjà tout cœur avait répondu. Le second était le doigt bucolique. Oh, j'ai t'adoré du soir à matin. C'est ainsi qu'une amie amoureuse appliquée la carte du tendre épée latin. Ô place mon belle, ô place d'enfant, quand dans le tendit frais et printanier, tu tirais ton bras sur ta jambe fine, je voyais une astray au fond du grenier. J'ai foutu le planton, mais rien ne me reste, mieux que mes branches et que la monnaie. Tu m'as démontré la bonne céleste, avec une fleur que tu m'as donnée. Je t'obéissais, tu m'étais soumise. Au grenier doré, tes lacets, tes voix, allait en venir dès l'aube en chemise, mirant ton jeune front à ton vieux miroir, et qui danse pourrait prendre la mémoire de ces temps d'aurorais et des firmaments, des rubans, des fleurs, des gaz et des moires. Oh, l'amour baguait un agate charmant. Nos jardins étaient un pot de tulipes. Tu masquais la vitre avec un jupon. Je prenais le bol de terre des pipes, et je te donnais la tasse et jupon. Et ces grands mêleurs qui nous faisions rire, ton méchant brûlé, ton boa perdu, et ces chers portraits du divin Shakespeare, qu'un soir pour soupir nous avons vendus. J'étais mendiant, et tu charitable. J'abassais à vol tes bras frais et ronds. Dante in folio nous serviait de table, pour manger gagnant et sans démérone. La première fois que moi, joyeux bouge, j'ai pris une bassier à ta livre infus. Quand tu tiens à lait décoiffé et rouge, j'ai resté tout pâle et j'ai cru indu. Te rappelais-tu nos bonheurs sans nombre, et tous ces fichus changés et chiffons, au cou des soupirs et nuques pleines d'ombre, se sont envolés dans les cieux profondes. Translation. Do you remember our sweet life, when we were both so young, and when we had no other desire in our hearts than to be well dressed and in love? When, by adding your age to my age, we could not count 40 years between us, and when, in our humble and tiny household, everything was spring to us even in winter. Fair days! Manuel was proud and wise. Paris sat at sacred banquets. Foy launched thunderbolts. And your corsage had a pin on which I pricked myself. Everything gazed upon you. A briefless lawyer, when I took you to the Prado to dine, you were so beautiful that the roses seemed to me to turn round, and I heard them say, "Is she not beautiful? How good she smells! What billowing hair! Beneath her mantle she hides a wing. Her charming bonnet is hardly unfolded." I wandered with thee, pressing thy supple arm. The passers-by thought that love bewitched had wedded, in our happy couple, the gentle month of April to the fair month of May. We lived concealed, content, with closed doors, devouring love, that sweet forbidden fruit. My mouth had not uttered a thing, when thy heart had already responded. The Sorbonne was the bucolic spot where I adored thee from eve till morn. 'Tis thus that an amorous soul applies the chart of the tender to the Latin country. O place Maubert! O place Dauphine! When in the fresh spring-like hut thou didst draw thy stocking on thy delicate leg, I saw a star in the depths of the garret. I have read a great deal of Plato, but nothing of it remains by me. Better than Malebranche and than the Manet, thou didst demonstrate to me celestial goodness. With the flower which thou gavest me, I obeyed thee. Thou didst submit to me, O gilded garret, to lace thee, to behold thee going and coming from dawn in thy chemise, gazing at thy young brow in thine ancient mirror. And who, when, would forego the memory of those days of aurora, and that firmament of flowers, of gauze, and of more, when love stammers a charming slang? Our gardens consisted of a pot of tulips. Thou didst mask the window with thy petticoat. I took the earthenware bowl and gave thee the Japanese cup. And those great misfortunes which made us laugh, thy cuff scorched, thy boa lost, and that dear portrait of the divine Shakespeare which we sold one evening that we might sup. I was a beggar, and thou wert charitable. I kissed thy fresh round arms in haste. A folio Dante served us as a table on which to eat merrily a centime's worth of chestnuts. The first time that, in my joyous den, I snatched a kiss from thy fiery lip, when thou wentest forth, dishevelled and blushing, I turned deathly pale, and I believed in God. Dost thou recall our innumerable joys, and all those fiches changed to rags? Oh, what sighs from our hearts full of gloom fluttered forth to the heavenly depths! The hour, the spot, these souvenirs of youth recalled, a few stars which began to twinkle in the sky, the funeral repose of those deserted streets, the imminence of the inexorable adventure which was in preparation, gave a pathetic charm to these verses murmured in a low tone in the dust by Jean Prouvaire, who, as we have seen, was a gentle poet. In the meantime a lamp had been lighted in the small barricade, and in the large one of those wax torches such as are to be met with on Shrove Tuesday, in front of vehicles loaded with masks, on their way to La Courtille. These torches, as the reader has seen, came from Faubourg Saint-Antoine. The torch had been placed in a sort of cage of paving stones, closed on three sides to shelter it from the wind, and disposed in such a fashion that all the light fell on the flag. The street and the barricade remained sunk in gloom, and nothing was to be seen except the red flag formidably illuminated as by an enormous dark lantern. This light enhanced the scarlet of the flag with an indescribable and terrible purple. End of Book 12, Chapter 6. Recording by Martina Hutchins in Berkeley, California.